Imagine this. While you're stuck fixing one small error in your code, developers around the world are creating more than 230 new GitHub repositories every single minute. And in 2025 alone, nearly 1 billion code commits were pushed on GitHub. At the same time, the Stack Overflow Developer Survey 2025 found that 84% of developers are already using or planning to use coding assistant tools in their development process, and 51% of professional developers are using them every single day. So one thing is very clear, the way people build software has changed, and this is exactly where Claude Code comes in. Now, Claude Code is a tool from Anthropic that can read your code base, edit files, run commands, and work with your development tools. Which means that it's not just something that you use to ask coding questions. It works directly inside your project folder through the terminal and your code editor. So in simple words, Claude Code is related to real project development. It connects with the place where your actual HTML, CSS, JavaScript, Python, and other project files are stored and helps you move from an idea to a working code with more clarity. So this topic is important because today's learners, students, developers, and working professionals are not just trying to memorize syntax. They want to build projects faster, understand errors better, and keep up with how modern software teams are working. But the real value of Claude Code is not that it does everything for you. The real value is that it becomes a coding partner that can help you plan, write, debug, improve, and understand your project while you stay in control, because Claude Code asks you for approval before editing files, running commands, or making network requests in its default permission flow. And that is why learning Claude Code matters now. So coding is no longer about typing line after line from scratch. It is only about knowing how to guide the right tools, review the output, understanding the logic, and turning ideas into working projects with confidence. So now that you understand why Claude Code matters and how it fits in today's coding workflow, let's quickly look at what we will be covering in today's masterclass. Why Claude Code matters. We will be understanding why developers are using tools like Claude Code and why this topic is important. What Claude Code does. Here we will learn what Claude Code really means and how it helps inside real project folder. Setup and first walkthrough. We will be installing Claude Code, opening the terminal and connecting with VS Code to start the first session. Building a mini project. Then we will use Claude Code to create a simple task manager app with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Understanding the project files. Then we will break down the HTML, CSS, and JavaScript files in simple language. Debugging and improving code. We will then fix a small issue, improve the app, and understand how Claude Code helps during coding. Best practices and recap. Then let's close with a safe usage tip, project review habits, and key takeaways from the demo. So now that we have seen how Claude Code can help us build, fix, and understand a project, here is a quick question to check your understanding. So what's the main use of Claude Code? Is it A, to edit videos, B, to work with project files, C, to design logos, or is it D, to browse social media? Let us know your answers in the comments below. Coding is no longer just about typing every single line manually. The way developers work is changing. So earlier, if someone wanted to build a project, they had to search for code examples, copy snippets, fix errors, open multiple tabs, and slowly connect everything together. Now, tools like Claude Code are changing that workflow. So instead of only asking questions in a chat window, we can work directly inside a project folder. Claude Code can help us create files, edit code, understand errors, run commands, and explain what is happening step by step. And this is important because modern learners don't want just theory. They want to build something, and they want to see which tool works in a real project. And that is why Claude Code is becoming a popular thing among developers, students, and people who want to build faster. According to the Stack Overflow Developer Survey 2025, a large number of developers are already using code assistant tools in their daily work. So this shows that these tools are no longer just a future idea, they're actually becoming a part of everyday development work. So in this masterclass, we will not just talk about Claude Code, we will be using it to build a simple task manager app. So this app allows users to add tasks, complete tasks, delete tasks, and even save them in the browser. So now that we understand why Claude Code matters today, let's move on to what Claude Code actually does. So Claude Code is a coding tool from Anthropic that works inside your terminal and development setup. So in simple words, this helps you work with your actual project files. It can read the file, understand the project structure, create new files, edit existing files, run commands, and explain the changes in simple language. So this makes Claude Code different from a normal chat tool. In a normal chat, you may ask for code and then manually copy and paste into your editor. Repeat. In a normal chat, you may ask for code and then manually copy and paste this into your editor. But in Claude Code, the tool works inside the project folder itself. For example, if we ask it to build a task manager app, it can create the HTML file, the CSS file, and even the JavaScript file directly inside the folder. So if we ask it to improve the design, it can update the CSS. And if there is a bug, it can inspect JavaScript and suggest a fix. But one thing is really important. Claude Code is not a replacement for learning. This is a helper, and we can still need to review the code. This is including understanding logic and testing the project. So in this tutorial, we will use Claude Code as a coding partner. So we will be giving clear instructions, review what it creates, test the result, and understand each important change. So now that we're clear about what Claude Code does, let's understand how it works inside a project. So Claude Code works best when it's open inside a project folder. So project folder is simply the place where all the project files are stored. For one task manager app, the folder will contain 3 main files. So the first file is index.html. So this file controls the structure of the page, and it also contains the heading, input box, button, and task list area. Now the second file is style.css. This file controls the design, and it decides the colors, spacing, buttons, layout, and the overall look of the app. Now the third file is script.js. Now this file controls the behavior. It decides what happens when a user adds a task, completes the task, deletes the task, or refreshes a page. Now this simple structure helps us understand how web projects are actually built. HTML gives us the page structure, CSS gives you the page design, and JavaScript gives you the page behavior. So when Claude Code is opened inside this folder, it can understand these files and help us work with them. It can also explain what each file does, create missing files, improve the code, and fix errors. Another important part is permissions. Claude Code usually asks for making changes or running commands. Now this is useful because it gives us control. We should always review what it wants to change before approving it. So now that we know how Claude Code works inside a project folder, let's move on to the main build process. So now that we understand what Claude Code is and how it works inside a project folder, let's understand the thinking process behind it. So Claude Code is useful because it doesn't just answer questions, it works with the actual files in a project. So now when we give it an instruction, it first tries to understand what we are asking for, then it checks the project structure, looks at relevant files, and suggests a plan, and only then it makes changes for that permission. Now this is what's different from simply copying code from a website or a chat window. For example, if you're asking it to create a task manager app, it needs to understand the purpose of the app, including the files required, the role of each file, and the features that should actually be included. Now the quality of the result depends heavily on the clarity of the instruction. A vague instruction like build an app can lead to a generic result, but a clear instruction like build a simple task manager using HTML, CSS, and JavaScript with add, complete, delete, and save features gives Claude Code a proper direction. And this is why when working with Claude Code, the main skill is not only coding, but it's to learn and explain the requirement clearly. Now once the requirement is clear, Claude Code can help you convert that idea into files, code, and working features. But the most important point is that the developer still stays in control. We then review the plan, approve the changes, test the result, and understand what has been created. So Claude Code works best when we treat it like a coding partner and not like a shortcut that removes learning. So now that we know how Claude Code converts clear instructions into projects, let's move on to why we should think about reviewing and improving those changes. So now that we know Claude Code can create and edit files, the next important question is, how do we actually make sure that the output is really good? Well, in real development, writing code is only one part of the process. The bigger part is checking whether the code works, whether it's easy to understand, and whether it can be improved. Now, this is where review becomes really important. Claude Code may generate a working solution, but we should always open the files, understand the structure, and test the output. Now, if the code is difficult to read, we can ask Claude Code to explain it in simple language. Now, if Claude Code is too long or messy, we can ask it to make the structure cleaner without changing the behavior. Now, this process is called refactoring. Refactoring doesn't mean adding new features, it means making the existing code easier to read, easier to explain, and easier to maintain. Now, another important part is debugging. Now, debugging means finding and fixing errors. So instead of saying that the app is broken, we should describe the exact problem. For example, after I add a task, the input box doesn't clear. So this gives Claude Code a specific issue to investigate. Now a clear problem statement helps it check the right file, identify the possible cause, and suggest a fix. But the real learning happens when we ask it to explain why the issue happened. And that way we're not just fixing the error, we're also understanding the topic behind the fix. So this is one of the best ways to use Claude Code for learning. It helps us to write, review, debug, and improve code step by step while still keeping us involved in the process. So now that we understand how code review and improvement work, let us move on to the best features that help us understand Claude safely and effectively. So when we finally have understood how Claude Code helps us work with the project, let's close a few important best practices. Start with a small and clear task instead of asking it to build everything at once. Give it specific instructions because a clear prompt leads to better results. Ask Claude Code to explain its plan before making changes, review the files before approving anything, and then test the project after a major step. So if something breaks, don't just ask it for a fix, ask why the issue happened so that you can understand the logic. Now for larger projects, use a claude.md file to define the project purpose, file structure, rules, and testing steps. Now the key takeaway is simple. Claude Code can help you build faster, but your understanding makes the project reliable. Now use it as a coding partner, review what it creates, test your work, and keep improving step by step. So now that we're clear about why this topic matters, let's begin with the actual Claude walkthrough. So we will start from Claude website itself. Before we build anything, everyone should understand where we're working. Apart from that, you should also know what your screen looks like and how we will be using Claude during the demo. So first, we open the browser and go to Claude AI. Once the page opens, we sign in with our Claude account, and after signing in, we land on the main Claude screen. So this is where we can start a new conversation, ask questions, generate code, and get explanations, upload files if needed, and continue earlier work. Now the most important area on this screen is the message box, because that is where we can type our request. And on the side, we may see previous chats or project-related options depending on your account and interface, but for this demo, we will keep things simple and work from a new chat. Now, before asking Claude to generate code, we will first ask it to explain what kind of files are needed for a small web app. And this is important because if we directly jump into code, beginners may feel lost. So, in the Claude message box, we will be typing, I want to build a simple task manager using HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Before giving me the code, explain what files I will be needing and what each file will be doing in a beginner friendly language. So this is the prompt which is GPT generated, which I've kept for easy reference. And the reason this prompt works well because it doesn't immediately ask for the code. It asks Claude to explain the project structure so that you can understand the basic idea before we start building. So now Claude should explain that we need three main files. The first file is index.html, and this file gives the page its structure. It decides what appears on the screen, like the heading, input box, button, task counter, and task list. Now the second file is style.css. This file controls how the page looks, and it decides the colors, spacing, card design, button style, and layout. Now the third file is script.js. Now this file controls how the app behaves, and it decides what happens inside when the user types a task, clicks add task, marks the task as done, deletes the task, or refreshes the browser. Now this is a good starting point because we're not just copying code, we're trying to understand how a small web project is organized. So now that the file structure is clear, let's move on and ask Claude to generate the actual code for the app. So now that Claude has explained which files are needed, we will ask it to create the first working version of Task Manager app. Now the key here is to give a clear request. If we type something very broad like build an app, Claude may still give an answer, but it may not match exactly what we want. So we will give the tool a proper requirement, just like we would explain a task to a developer. So in the Claude message box, we are going to type, create an extremely simple task manager app using HTML, CSS, JavaScript, where the app needs to allow users to add tasks, mark the tasks as complete, and save the tasks so that they are there after refreshing. Also add a small task counter that shows how many incomplete tasks are remaining. Give me the code in 3 separate sections, which are as follows: index.html, style.css, script.css. Now this particular prompt was prepared with GPT for easy reference, and it's useful because it clearly explains the app, along with which it also explains technologies, the features, and how the answers should be organized. Now we will be telling Claude exactly what we want instead of leaving it open-ended. So Claude should be generating 3 sections of the code. we will first look at the HTML section. The HTML section may look something like this. So as you can see, the page begins with a normal HTML document setup. So inside the head section, we have the title of the page and the link to style.css. And within the body, we have the main app card, as you can see over here. Now the h1 tag displays the title task manager. The form contains the input box and the ask button. Now the task counter paragraph will show how many tasks still pending. The empty message paragraph will appear when there are no tasks. The UL element is the task list area where JavaScript will be adding tasks. At the bottom, script.js is connected so that the page can respond when the users interact. So now let's have a look at the CSS section generated by Claude. Now this can look something like this. Now the star selector here applies the box sizing to everything, which helps spacing behave more predictably. Now the body section removes default margin, sets the font, gives the page a soft background and centers the app on the screen. Now the app class creates the white card where the task manager sits. The form section keeps the input box and button in one row. The input section styles the text box. And the button section makes the add task button look clean and clickable. Now the task counter and empty message section styles the small text messages. The UL section removes the default bullet points from the list. And the LI section styles each task row. Now the completed class gives completed tasks a line through effect. The actions class keeps done and delete buttons next to each other. As you can see, it's as listed over here. Now let's go ahead and move on to the JavaScript section. This is the most important file because it controls the behavior of the app. So Claude may generate something like this. So now the first 5 lines connect JavaScript to the HTML elements using their IDs. Now the task variable loads save tasks from the browser or starts with an empty list if nothing has been saved. The save tasks function stores the task in local storage. The update counter function counts how many tasks are not completed. The update empty message function decides whether the empty message should be visible or not. Now the render tasks functions redraws the full task list on the screen. The form event listener runs when the user clicks add tasks, adds the task, clears the input box, saves the task and updates the screen. So now that we have generated all 3 parts, let's move on from Claude Code to our editor, which can actually run our app. So now that Claude has given us all of the code, we need to place it inside real files. So inside this folder, we will be creating 3 files with the exact names, which is index.html, style.css, and script.js. Now these names are important because the HTML file is already linking to style.css and javascript.js. So as you can see, I have my new VS Code window open over here. Let me go ahead and create a new folder. Let's just go ahead and create a new file and name it as index.html. So let's go ahead and save it in this particular folder called Task Manager Demo. So in index.html, we will be pasting the HTML code. So in style.css, we paste the CSS code. And in javascript.js, we will paste the JavaScript code. So after pasting everything, we will save all the 3 files. Now let's quickly understand how these files are connected. In index.html, this line connects the CSS file. If you can see over here, there's one line which is link rel style sheet href style.css. So this short HTML line is included for reference and it connects the design files to the page. Now without this line, the app would still show the content, but it would not have styling from style.css. Now, so in the same HTML file, this line connects the JavaScript file. If you can see here, there's one line over here, which is script src within quotes script.js. So this reference line connects the behavior file to the page. So without this line, the app would show the input and button, but clicking add task would not work because JavaScript would not be loaded. Now that all of the files are connected and saved, we're ready to run the app in the browser. So before that, let me just go ahead and add all of the files. Let me add a new file with the name of style.css. So we've saved the file. Now let's go ahead, go back to Claude and then paste the code. We have our code generated for CSS. Go back and paste this. Now let's go ahead and create script.js. Now let's head back and copy the JavaScript code. Now these are the lines of code for JavaScript. As you can see, there's several functions here, which is toggle tasks, delete tasks. So these are all the functionalities of, here we have the code for style.css, where all of the features which are to be contained in the app are mentioned. Here we have index.html, which I've already walked you through. So now let's go ahead and run the app like a normal beginner web project. Now, since this app only uses HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, we don't need a backend server. We can run it directly inside the browser. So if you have live server extension in VS Code, you can right-click on index.html and open it with live server. So let's go ahead and try that. So we have reveal in File Explorer. Let's go ahead and open this. So as you can see, I've simply opened the project folder on the computer and double-clicked on index.html. So once the app opens in the browser, we should see the task manager title, the input box, the add task button, and the task counter, including the empty message and the task list area. So at the beginning, since there are no tasks, the empty message should be visible. And it should say no tasks yet, add your first task above. But in this case, it's 0 tasks remaining. So this sample text is a part of the app interface which helps users understand what to do when the list is empty. Now let's go ahead and test the first task. In the input box, we shall type learn Claude walkthrough. So as you can see, I have typed my first task. So the sample task is prepared for quick testing and it helps us check whether the add task button is working correctly or not. Now we click add task. So the task should appear in the list and the empty message should disappear. The counter should also show 1 task remaining, and this can confirm that adding a task works. So let's go ahead and click on add. So as you can see, our requirements have been met. Now let's go ahead and test a second task. We will be typing build first mini project. Now this second sample task helps us confirm that the app can handle multiple tasks and not just one. When we click on add task again, we should see 2 tasks on the screen and the counter should show 2 tasks remaining. Now let's go ahead and click on one of the tasks to show that it has been done. So now the done button here is inbuilt, so we just have to click on the task in order to cancel it out. So like I said, the task text should get crossed out and the counter should reduce the task to 1 remaining. So let's go ahead and try that. So as you can see, it showed that the completed tasks are not counted as the remaining tasks. Now let's try to test the undo button. We can click undo, which is again inbuilt onto the same task. So when this is done, the line through should be disappearing and the counter should increase again. So let's go ahead and try that out. So when you click on your task which had been crossed out, we can see that the button can switch the task status back and forth. And the counter also increase back to 2. And the task should disappear from the list and the counter should update to 1 again. So let's go ahead and try that. So when I cross this out, we have 1 task remaining. Finally, we refresh the browser. The remaining tasks should still be visible. And this is important because it confirms that the local storage is still working. The app is saving tasks in the browser and loading them again when the page opens. So when we refresh our page here, you can see that the task remains. So now that the app is running successfully, let's go back to Claude and use it to understand the code in a simpler way. So now that the app is working in the browser, we will not move ahead blindly. We will use Claude to explain the code because understanding the code is just as important as running it. So now in Claude, we will enter this prompt. Explain this task manager app in a beginner-friendly way. Explain the role of index.html, style.css, as well script.js. Also explain the process following that, which is when the user adds, deletes, completes, and refreshes the tasks. So this doesn't only ask what the code means line by line, it asks how the app works from the user's point of view. So as you can see, Claude should be explaining that index.html creates the structure of the page, style.css controls the design, and script.js controls the behavior. Now this should explain whenever the user adds a task, JavaScript reads the input, stores the tasks, saves it, and displays it. So when the user completes a task, JavaScript changes the completed value. Now when the user deletes a task, JavaScript removes it from the list. When the page refreshes, JavaScript loads the saved tasks from the browser. Now let's try to look at some pieces for ourselves. So if you want to have a look at the script.js section over here, so this block of code is for when the first page loads. So as you can see here, the local storage is like a tiny storage box and it can store strings. The function here, which is local storage.getItem, asks whether you have anything saved under the label tasks, and if the answer is true, it hands back a long text string. And here json.parse converts that text into a real JavaScript. So as you can see, if there's nothing saved yet, getItem returns null so that the dashes and the square brackets can give you an empty array instead. Now let's try to understand event.prevent default. Now this particular line of code stops the browser default's behavior, which would normally be to reload the page. And this will take whatever you typed into the input value and it trims the extra spaces. Now if you type nothing, it just stops and no empty tasks allowed. And if that's not true, add task.text. So if that's not true, add task text is called. For other lines of code, for example, get element by ID, this code block is included for easy reference and it connects JavaScript to different parts of HTML page. Now, each get element by ID line is looking for an element with a matching ID, and for example, task input connects the input box, task list connects to the list, and task counter connects to the counter text. Now, let's try to understand this part. Look at this part, const task font. So this block of code is included for easy reference and it connects JavaScript to different parts of the HTML page. Each get ID line looks for an element within the matching ID. Now, for example, task input connects to the input box, task list connects to the list, and task counter connects to the counter text. Now take a look at this particular line. Let tasks is equal to JSON parse. So this small line is important because it controls saved data. Local storage.getItem checks whether the tasks are already saved within the browser. Now JSON.parse converts saved text back into usable JavaScript list. Now if there is no saved tasks, the empty array starts the app with no tasks. Now let's try to look at the save function. This reference snippet shows that the app saves tasks. Local storage shows the data in the browser, and JSON.stringify turns the task list into text so that the browser can save it properly. Now let's try to understand the counter function. So in this block of code, the filter part checks the list and keeps only the tasks which are not completed. The length part counts them, and the text content line updates the counter on the page. Now let's try to understand the empty message logic. So as you can see, if there are 0 tasks, the message is displayed, and if it's at least 1 task, the message is hidden. Now let's try to understand the add task flow. So as you can see, the block of code for add task flow is here. So this code block controls what happens when the user clicks on add task. Event prevent default supports the page from refreshing automatically, and task input value trim reads the task and improves the extra spaces. Now the if function stops the blank tasks. Task.push adds a new task object and text and completed status, including task input value, and completed status task input value clears the input box. So now that we can understand the main code flow, let's move on to Claude to improve the app. So let's head back to Claude and type the following prompt in order to improve the app. This can be done with one useful feature. We already have a task counter and an empty message. So now let's ask Claude to improve the design and make the app feel better for users. So instead of asking too many changes, we will give a focused request. So in Claude, we will enter this prompt. Improve the task manager design without changing how the app works. Make the layout cleaner. Make the buttons easier to read, improve spacing, and keep the design simple. And finally, tell me what CSS changes I am supposed to be making. This prompt only asks you for design improvement. It clearly says that it's not supposed to change how the app works, so Claude should only focus on the CSS part. So Claude may suggest improving the button spacing and giving the action buttons different styles. For example, it may suggest adding these classes. So it's suggested that we add an overall container along with heading plus counter, input and add button row, task list items, and delete button, along with completed tasks, making the done state obvious. So like I said, the first button inside actions area gets a green color, which works well for done and undo. The last button gets a red color, which works well for delete. And the hover styles make the buttons slightly darker when the user moves the mouse over them. So Claude may also suggest making the layout better on small screens. Now the reference snippet helps make the app look better on mobile screens. So now that the screen is narrowed, the form changes from a row to a column, and the button becomes a full width. Each task item also stacks neatly so it doesn't look too cramped. So now that we can save the CSS file and refresh the browser, the app should look much cleaner. The add task button should still work and the task should still appear. The done and the delete buttons should now be easier to understand visually. Now this is important because whenever we improve design, we should also test the app behavior and make sure that it doesn't break. So now that we have improved the app, let's move on to a bug fixing example. So before that, let me just show you how the modified page looks like. Let's head back to VS Code, replace the previous contents of the CSS file with the new block of code, save it. Now head back to HTML, index.html, and reveal in File Explorer. When we open index here, refresh the page. So as you can see, we have added new elements here as spoken about. Let me just go ahead and type another task. Build a Claude project. We're supposed to click on add. it looks much cleaner and the cross button is inside a clean box. Now let's try to see how Claude can help when something goes wrong. So let's imagine a common bug. After adding a task, the input box doesn't clear. This is a simple issue, but it's a perfect example of how to explain a problem clearly. So instead of saying my app is not working, we can describe the exact behavior. So in Claude, we will type, in my task manager, input box does not clear. Please explain what may have gone wrong and show me the exact line of code or JavaScript line which I will have to check. Let's go ahead and run this prompt. Now this debugging prompt was prepared with GPT for easy reference, and it works well because it explains the issue clearly. What we're telling Claude isn't what we did, but what happened and what we're expecting to happen. Now Claude should point us to the line that clears the input box. So the corrected line is task input value. So the corrected line is important because it sets the input box value to empty text. And that is what clears the input field after the task is added. So if the code accidentally looks like this, as you can see here, which is input.value, this broken version helps us understand the bug. It only reads the value from the input box, but it does nothing to change it. Because nothing is assigned, the input box stays filled. So then we fix the line, save the file and refresh the browser. We then type the task, add the add task, click add task, and this time the input box should be clear. And that confirms that the bug is fixed. Now let's test another common issue. Sometimes a user may enter only spaces and click on add task. So our app should not add any empty task. So the code to prevent that is as follows. So this block of code which you see here in my text box, blank tasks, then removes extra spaces, and if the final text is empty, it stops the function from adding anything more. So then we go to the browser and try typing only spaces in the input box. So when we click add, nothing should be added. And this confirms that the empty task check is working. So now that we've used Claude to understand how to fix a bug, let's clean the code so it becomes easier. So now that our app works, we can ask Claude to clean the JavaScript structure without changing what the app does. Now this is useful because the code should not only work, it should also be easy to read and explain. So in Claude, we enter this prompt. Refactor the Claude code to change it in a way that the JS code is easier to read without changing how the app works. Use clear function names and explain what each function does. So now this GPT prompt is useful because it clearly says that we want cleaner code and not new features. And that keeps Claude focused on improving readability. Now Claude may also suggest moving some logic into separate functions. So as you can see with this prompt, we were able to refactor the existing JavaScript code, which makes it easier to understand for a beginner. As you can see here, we have function by function explained. So we have the explanation given to each one of the functions, along with a pattern which is worth remembering for your easy reference. So like I said, you can also do bug fixing and refactoring any part of the code, or including the full code itself. And that was the walkthrough of our Task Manager app. And that brings us to the end of this Claude Code Masterclass. We have learned what Claude Code is, why it matters, and how it works inside a project, and how it can help us build, debug, and improve code step by step. So keep practicing with small projects first, understand what the tool changes, and always test your work before moving ahead. So subscribe to Simplilearn for more such insights and check out our related videos to continue learning.